The lies were suffocating me, their cloying sweetness a mockery of the bitterness rising in my throat. Each white petal seemed to whisper, "Fool, fool, fool." I stood there, a porcelain doll in a designer dress, the picture of bridal perfection, except for the gaping hole where my heart used to be. He left me a note. A note, like I was some post-it reminder he'd forgotten to throw away. Scrawled on the back of a cocktail napkin, the ink smeared with what I could only assume were his tears of guilt. Or maybe just spilled champagne. "Kenna, I can't do this. I'm going back to Melissa. I know this is unforgivable, but she's the one. Always has been. I'm so sorry. Nathan." "Sorry." Babe running back to his ex-BRB. "Yeah, no." The church, with its stained glass windows and vaulted ceilings, suddenly felt like a suffocating cage. The guests, their faces a blur of pity and morbid fascination, were vultures circling a dying animal. My parents, their faces etched with a mixture of shock and disappointment, were statues frozen in a tableau of parental despair. And me? I was a volcano about to erupt. Humiliation burned hotter than the 1,000-watt smile I plastered on my face just moments ago. Betrayal was a knife twisting in my gut, each turn a reminder of his lies, his deceit, his utter disregard for my heart. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, the culmination of a 2-year relationship, a whirlwind romance that had swept me off my feet and landed me, apparently, flat on my face. Nathan, with his boyish charm and ambitious dreams, had promised me the world. A world that apparently didn't include me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was run. Runaway bride. I fled the church, a runaway bride in a designer gown, the train trailing behind me like a tattered flag of surrender. The guests parted like the Red Sea, their whispers chasing me down the aisle. I burst through the church doors, the cool night air a slap in the face. Tears streamed down my cheeks, blurring my vision. I didn't know where I was going. Just away. Away from the church. Away from the guests. Away from the wreckage of my dreams. Then, the screech of tires pierced the night. A blinding light. A deafening horn. And then, nothing. Waking up to a nightmare. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Sterile. Antiseptic. The unmistakable aroma of a hospital. "She's awake." A voice chirped. "Sienna, can you hear me?" I blinked, my vision blurry. A woman in a white coat hovered over me, her face a mask of professional concern. What happened?" I croaked, my voice raspy. You were in an accident," the doctor explained gently. "A hit and run. You're lucky to be alive." Lucky? Was that the word for it? To survive a car accident, only to wake up to the realization that your fiancé had left you for his ex on your wedding day? But then, something strange happened. As the doctor continued to speak, I heard another voice. Not out loud, but in my head. "She's lying." The voice sneered. "She's not telling you the whole story. She messed up the surgery. She's trying to cover her tracks." I stared at the doctor, my eyes wide with disbelief. Was I hearing her thoughts? "Is everything all right?" the doctor asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "She's worried," the voice in my head continued. "She's afraid you'll sue." I closed my eyes, trying to make sense of the chaos in my mind. The accident. The betrayal. The voices. It was all too much. The sterile scent of antiseptic clung to the air, a stark contrast to the clawing sweetness of the lies that had haunted my nightmares. I blinked, the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room, a jarring assault on my senses. My head throbbed in time with the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, a constant reminder of my fragile mortality. But something else was different. A buzzing. A hum. A symphony of whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. The noise. At first it was just noise, a cacophony of thoughts. A jumbled mess of anxieties and desires. The nurse worrying about her sick child. The patient in the next room, praying for a miracle. The doctor in the hallway, fantasizing about his upcoming vacation. It was overwhelming. Terrifying. Like being trapped in a crowded room, where everyone was shouting their innermost secrets. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the noise, but it was no use. The voice followed me. Relentless. Insistent. Then, something shifted. Like tuning a radio, I started to make sense of it. I could focus on individual voices, individual minds. I could hear the nurse's fear for her child, the patient's desperate hope, the doctor's fleeting fantasies. And what I heard, well, let's just say it was eye-opening. The hidden truths. The kindly old woman in the next bed. The one who'd offered me a comforting smile? She was secretly plotting to steal my pudding cup. The handsome young doctor with the charming bedside manner? He was more interested in my insurance coverage than my recovery. The nurse with the tired eyes and gentle touch? She was battling a crushing student loan debt and a failing marriage. It was a revelation, a terrifying and exhilarating glimpse into the hidden world of human consciousness. I was no longer just Sienna Carter, the jilted bride, the victim of a hit and run. I was Sienna Carter, the mind reader, the woman who could see through the facades, the woman who could hear the lies, the woman who could expose the carefully constructed personas. Fear warred with fascination. This power, this unexpected gift, was both a blessing and a curse. A window into the darkest corners of the human psyche. A glimpse into the secret desires, the hidden motives, the unspoken truths that lurked beneath the surface. But it was also a weapon, a tool, a means to an end. And as the initial shock wore off, a sense of purpose, of determination began to take root. Nathan thought he could break me. He thought he could discard me like a used napkin, leave me to wallow in my misery. He was wrong. I would use this gift, this power, to rebuild myself, to rise above the ashes of my shattered dreams. I would expose the lies, reveal the hypocrisy, destroy the corruption that festered beneath the polished veneer of Washington society. I would become a force to be reckoned with, a woman who could not be ignored, a woman who would make them all pay for underestimating me. The whispers in my head were no longer a source of fear. They were a symphony of secrets, a chorus of vulnerabilities, a map to the hidden levers of power. And I, Sienna Carter, the mind reader, the woman reborn, would learn to conduct them all. The air in Washington, D.C. was thick with ambition. It hung heavy in the marbled halls of Congress. It lingered in the smoky back rooms of power lunches. It clung to the designer suits of lobbyists like a second skin. Returning to the city after my accident, I felt it more keenly than ever before. But this time, I had a secret weapon. Gone were the days of naive idealism, of believing in the noble pursuit of public service. My newly acquired mind-reading ability had ripped the veil off the political landscape, exposing the raw, unfiltered truth beneath the carefully crafted facades. Washington, D.C. is a city built on secrets, lies, betrayals, hidden agendas. And now, I could hear it all. Every whispered conversation, every carefully crafted strategy, every hidden motive. It was like being given a backstage pass to the greatest show on earth. My first foray back into the political arena was a cocktail reception hosted by a prominent senator. The room buzzed with the usual suspects, politicians, lobbyists, journalists, all vying for attention, all playing their assigned roles in this elaborate dance of power. A familiar face emerged from the sea of fakes. Senator Thompson. His face plastered with a practiced smile, he approached me with an outstretched hand. "Sienna, my dear, so glad you could make it. We've missed you and little Sienna Carter." His thoughts echoed in my mind, unfiltered and raw. Back from the dead. Wonder if she still has that fire in her belly, or if that accident finally knocked some sense into her. I returned his smile, my own carefully crafted mask hiding the amusement bubbling within. "Senator, it's a pleasure to be back," I said smoothly, meeting his gaze head-on. "And yes, the fire is still burning." Good, he thought, his eyes gleaming with a predatory glint. She could be useful. Very useful. The evening was a revelation. I drifted through the crowd, a silent observer, my mind a sponge soaking up the secrets swirling around me. I heard the congressman's hushed bribe to a lobbyist, the senator's carefully veiled threat to a rival, the journalist's cynical assessment of the latest scandal. It was intoxicating. This access to the raw, unfiltered thoughts of the powerful. I felt like a puppet master, pulling the strings, manipulating the players in this grand game of political chess. And as I watched them all, these masters of the universe, their carefully constructed facades crumbling under the scrutiny of my mind, I knew I had found my purpose. This was my revenge. Not the petty, vindictive kind that Nathan deserved, but something far more powerful. I would use my gift to expose the hypocrisy, the corruption, the rot that festered at the heart of the city. I would become a force for change, a champion for the voiceless, a thorn in the side of the powerful. The oak-paneled conference room hummed with tension. Across the table sat Senator Henderson, his face a mask of practiced indifference. Beside him, his aides fidgeted, their carefully neutral expressions betraying a hint of anxiety. We were here to discuss the Clean Energy Bill, a piece of legislation that had been stalled in committee for months. My client, a renewable energy company, was desperate to get it passed. Senator, I began, my voice smooth and confident. We both know this bill is crucial. It's not just about clean energy. It's about jobs, economic growth, and securing a future for our children. Blah blah blah, Henderson thought, his eyes glazing over. Just get to the point, Carter. What's the real angle here? What's in it for me? I smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of my lips. I understand your concerns about the impact on the traditional energy sector, Senator, but I believe we can find a compromise. A solution that benefits everyone. Compromise. Solution, he scoffed internally. Don't insult my intelligence, girl. It's all about the bottom line. Who's lining my pockets, perhaps? I continued, leaning forward, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. A certain provision regarding tax breaks for companies investing in carbon capture technology could sway your opinion. His eyes widened, a flicker of greed momentarily disrupting his carefully cultivated facade. Now she's talking, he thought, a calculating glint entering his eyes. That could be lucrative, very lucrative. I had hit the mark, not just the political angle but the personal one. Thanks to my little mind-reading perk, I knew that Henderson had invested heavily in a carbon capture startup. This wasn't just about policy, it was about personal gain. The meeting concluded with a handshake and a promise to reconsider his position on the bill. As I left the senator's office, a wave of exhilaration washed over me. This was it. This was the power I now wielded. Suddenly, lobbying wasn't just about schmoozing and backroom deals. It was about knowing what everyone was really thinking, what they truly wanted, and then using that knowledge to get what I wanted. Word of my successes spread like wildfire through the corridors of power. Sienna Carter, the lobbyist who always seemed to be one step ahead. The woman who could anticipate her opponents' moves before they even made them. I became a sought-after commodity. My phone rang off the hook with requests from clients desperate for my services. I played the game with a newfound confidence, a quiet ruthlessness that surprised even me. I exposed corrupt officials, brokered deals that seemed impossible, and manipulated situations to my advantage with a deftness that would have made Machiavelli proud. The fundraiser was a typical Washington affair. Chandeliers glittered, champagne flowed, and the air crackled with forced smiles and veiled insults from the political elite. I stood near the grand staircase, a silent observer, my mind sifting through the superficial chatter and unearthing the true motives beneath. Then he entered the room. Dominic Graves. The name alone could make seasoned politicians tremble. He was a legend in the halls of Congress. A man who had clawed his way to the top with a ruthless efficiency that bordered on terrifying. The House Majority Whip. The Kingmaker. The man who could make or break careers with a single phone call. He moved through the crowd with a quiet confidence that commanded attention. His eyes, sharp, intelligent, missed nothing. His smile, rare and fleeting, was a weapon wielded with precision. And when he stopped in front of me, a hush seemed to fall over the room. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice a low rumble that sent a shiver down my spine. "I've heard a great deal about you. Intriguing." I heard him think, "This one's different, she's not intimidated, there's a fire in her eyes." "Congressman Graves," I replied, meeting his gaze with a composure I didn't entirely feel. "The pleasure is all mine, she's playing it cool." He mused, his lips curving into a subtle smirk. "But I can see the wheels turning behind those eyes. She's calculating, ambitious." We spoke for what felt like both an eternity and a fleeting moment. He was unlike anyone I'd ever met. His mind was a whirlwind of strategy, a chessboard, where every move was calculated, every word a carefully placed piece. But beneath the political machinations I sensed something else, a kindred spirit, a hunger for power that mirrored my own. "You have a unique talent, Miss Hard," he said, his eyes boring into mine. "A knack for getting things done. She's dangerous." He thought, a hint of admiration coloring his assessment. "But danger can be useful, very useful. I learned from the best," I replied, a touch of Irony lacing my voice. Yes, his mind flashed back to a recent political victory I'd orchestrated. The Henderson deal, brilliant, ruthless. I like that. As the conversation drew to a close, I felt a pull towards him, and he was a force of nature, a man who embodied the very essence of power, and in that moment I knew that our paths were destined to intertwine. I look forward to seeing what you accomplish, Miss Carter, he said, his voice laced with a subtle challenge. Don't underestimate me, Congressman, I replied, a hint of steel in my voice. I wouldn't dream of it, he thought, his eyes gleaming with a predatory intensity. This one's going to be interesting. And as I watched him walk away, his presence leaving a palpable void in the room, I felt a surge of excitement, a thrill of anticipation for the battles to come. Dominic Graves had thrown down the gauntlet, and I, Sienna Carter, was more than ready to pick it up. The whisper started subtly at first. It was just a few curious glances, a couple of hesitant approaches at cocktail parties. Then the invitations began to arrive, not just to the usual fundraising galas and political hobnobbing events, but to private dinners, closed-door meetings, and intimate gatherings of the truly powerful. Sienna, darling, Senator Bellwether, a woman who could charm the birds out of the trees with her southern drawl, confided one evening, I simply must pick your brain about this infrastructure bill. You seem to have a knack for understanding the nuances. She knows, I thought, amused. She doesn't know how, but she knows. I have an edge. Aloud, I simply smiled and said, Senator, I'm always happy to offer my insights. My insights, of course, were gleaned not from policy papers and expert analysis but from the unfiltered thoughts of the very people who shape those policies. I knew their motivations, their fears, their hidden agendas. I knew what arguments would resonate, what compromises would be acceptable, what buttons to push to get the desired outcome. It wasn't long before I was playing the game at a whole new level. I was whispering in the ears of senators, influencing policy decisions, and building alliances that would have been unthinkable just a few months ago. My client list grew exponentially, encompassing not just corporations and advocacy groups, but also individual politicians seeking an edge in the cutthroat world of Washington politics. Miss Carter, Congressman Riley, a man whose ambition outweighed his talent, pleaded, I need your help. The re-election campaign is floundering. My opponent is gaining ground. What do I do? He's terrified, I noted, watching his internal panic escalate. He's willing to do anything to win. Congressman, I said calmly, I believe a strategic leak about your opponent's questionable campaign finances could shift the narrative in your favor. She's ruthless, he thought, a flicker of admiration mixed with fear. But effective. Exactly what I need. The leak, carefully orchestrated and timed to perfection, did its job. Riley's opponent was embroiled in scandal, his campaign imploding under the weight of public scrutiny. Riley, meanwhile, sailed to re-election, singing my praises to anyone who would listen. My reputation grew. Sienna Carter, the woman who could turn the tide. The strategist with the Midas touch. The whisperer in the halls of power. I was no longer just a lobbyist. I was a kingmaker. And as I watched the political landscape shift and reshape under my influence, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction, a quiet triumph over the limitations of my past. Nathan, with his petty betrayals and his limited vision, had no idea what he'd unleashed. He thought he was discarding a fiancé. He'd actually created a force to be reckoned with. The game was afoot. And I, Sienna Carter, the mind reader, the rising star, was playing to win. It happened at a gala for the National Symphony Orchestra. A stuffy affair filled with the usual mix of politicians, donors, and social climbers. I was there with Senator Bellwether, my arm linked with hers as we navigated the champagne-fueled crowd. Sienna, darling, she purred, you simply must meet Congressman Graves. He's been quite intrigued by your recent successes. Intrigued indeed. I caught Dominic's eye across the room. He was watching me, a subtle smile playing on his lips. This should be fun. As I made my way toward him, a familiar presence lurked at the edge of my awareness. Nathan. He was hovering near the bar, his face a mask of forced cheer as he chatted with a group of lobbyists. But his eyes, those were fixed on me, and they were filled with disbelief and regret. No way. I heard him think, his internal monologue a symphony of panic. That's Sienna. With Graves. What the hell is she doing? The look on his face when he saw me talking to Dominic Graves? Priceless. It was like watching a cartoon character realize they just walked off a cliff. He hadn't just lost a fiancée. He'd lost his access to power, to influence, to the world he thought he belonged in. I saw the realization dawn on him. The understanding that he'd traded a winning hand for a pile of worthless chips. He'd chosen Melissa. The safe bet. The comfortable choice. And in doing so, he'd missed out on the opportunity to be part of something truly extraordinary. She's glowing. His envy was a palpable thing. Powerful. Confident. She's everything I thought she'd be, and more. His self-adulation was almost satisfying. Almost. But I had bigger fish to fry. Bigger games to play. Dominic was waiting, his eyes twinkling with amusement as he watched the scene unfold. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice a welcome distraction from Nathan's mental meltdown. "You seem to have caught the attention of our resident prodigal son." "He has a knack for making poor choices," I replied, my voice laced with a hint of bitterness. "Indeed," Dominic thought, his gaze lingering on Nathan for a moment. "A man of limited vision. He doesn't deserve her." The conversation shifted to more pressing matters. Upcoming legislation, political alliances, the delicate dance of power that played out in this city every day. But I couldn't help stealing a glance back at Nathan. His face was now a mask of despair. He tried to reach out, of course. A few awkward phone calls. A couple of emails filled with apologies and excuses. But I'd ignored them all. He'd made his choice. And now he had to live with the consequences. As the evening wore on, I felt a sense of closure. A quiet satisfaction at witnessing his regret. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about proving to myself and to him that I was more than just the woman he left behind. I was Sienna Carter, the rising star. The woman who could make senators tremble and congressmen beg for her favor. And as I walked out of the gala that night, Dominic's hand resting lightly on my back, I knew. Nathan was just a footnote in my story. A stepping stone on my path to power. The future was mine for the taking. And I wasn't going to waste it by looking back. Eleanor Vance. The name itself tasted like stale whiskey and broken promises. She was Nathan's boss. A congresswoman whose ambition was only surpassed by her ruthlessness. And she, like Nathan, had underestimated me. Big mistake. Vance saw me as a threat, not just to her political aspirations but to her carefully constructed image of power and control. She tried to subtly undermine me, planting rumors, questioning my influence, attempting to freeze me out of key meetings. Amateur hour. I smirked, amusement playing on my lips. She thinks she can play me. I heard her think during a charity gala. Her eyes narrowed as she watched me effortlessly charm a key donor. She's getting too close to Dominic. That needs to stop. "Oh, Eleanor," I thought, a wave of amusement washing over me. "You have no idea what I can hear." Vance's attempts at sabotage were clumsy, predictable. She tried to exclude me from important events, only to find me already there, having anticipated her move. She'd spread whispers about my questionable lobbying tactics, conveniently forgetting her own history of backroom deals and shady alliances. It was almost pathetic. She's trying to discredit me. I realized, listening to her inner circle gossip about my sudden rise to prominence. She thinks if she can damage my reputation, she can weaken my influence. Clever girl, I thought, a hint of admiration creeping in. But not clever enough. I decided to play along, letting her think she was getting under my skin. I'd feign surprise at her snide remarks, act flustered by her attempts to exclude me. It was all an act. A carefully crafted performance designed to lull her into a false sense of security. "She's rattled," I heard her think after I accidentally spilled wine on her designer dress at a political fundraiser. "Good. She's starting to crack." "Oh, Eleanor," I thought, a slow smile spreading across my face. "You have no idea. I'm not cracking. I'm just getting started." I knew Vance was planning something. I could hear the hushed conversations, the whispered phone calls, the frantic scrambling behind the scenes. She was trying to dig up dirt on me, anything she could use to discredit me, to paint me as some kind of manipulative, power-hungry schemer. She's looking for leverage, I realized, listening to her internal monologue, as she met with a private investigator. She thinks if she can find something on me, she can force me to back down. Good luck with that, Eleanor, I thought, amused. My secrets are buried deep, and even if you find something, well, let's just say I have a few secrets of my own to share. The game was afoot, and I was ready to play. Vance thought she was hunting me, but the truth was I was hunting her. And I had a distinct advantage. I knew her every move before she even made it. It was only a matter of time before she realized she wasn't the predator in this situation. She was the prey. The line between ally and lover blurred. It started with late-night strategy sessions, whispered conversations over documents spread across Dominic's mahogany desk. We were a formidable team, our minds working in tandem, anticipating our opponent's moves, crafting strategies that were both cunning and effective. "You have a remarkable instinct for this, Sienna," Dominic said one evening, his eyes gleaming with admiration as we celebrated a particularly hard-won victory. "A sixth sense for the political chessboard. It's a gift," I murmured, swirling the wine in my glass, watching him watch me. I replied, a playful smile curving my lips. "Or maybe just a really good poker face." She's being coy, he thought, amused. But I know better. There's something more to her. Something she's not revealing. He was right, of course. But he didn't need to know the full extent of my abilities to appreciate my talent. Dominic was different. He didn't treat me like some delicate flower or a trophy wife. He saw me as an equal, a partner, a force to be reckoned with. He valued my mind, my ambition, my ruthlessness, and he wasn't afraid of it. "You're not like the others, Sienna," he said one night as we shared a bottle of wine in his dimly lit study. "You don't play the game for the social status or the photo ops. You play it for the power. And you wield it with a precision that's both terrifying and exhilarating." She's a queen in the making, he thought, his gaze lingering on my face. A queen who deserves a king who can match her stride. The attraction was undeniable. It simmered beneath the surface of our political discussions, a charged current that crackled between us with every shared glance, every whispered conversation. We were two sides of the same coin, both driven by a hunger for power, a desire to shape the world in our own image. But it wasn't just about ambition. There was a genuine connection, an intellectual and emotional intimacy that deepened with every passing day. We challenged each other, pushed each other, and found solace in the shared understanding of our unique positions in this city of secrets. "You understand me, Dominic," I said one night, my voice barely above a whisper as we stood on his balcony, overlooking the city lights. "You don't judge my ambition, my methods. I admire them," he thought, his eyes filled with a warmth I'd never seen before. "She's everything I've ever wanted in a partner, strong, intelligent, fearless." The first kiss was inevitable. It happened in the quiet intimacy of his study after a particularly heated debate about a controversial bill. It was a clash of wills, a battle of intellects, that culminated in a surrender to the undeniable attraction that had been building between us. "Sienna," he breathed, his lips finding mine in a kiss that was both demanding and tender. "She's mine," he thought, a possessive streak flaring within him. "Mine to protect. Mine to cherish. Mine to share this world with." And as I melted into his embrace, I knew that I'd found more than just a political ally. I'd found a partner, a lover. A man who saw me for who I truly was. A woman with the power to change the world. And together we were unstoppable. The snow fell softly outside, blanketing the city in a pristine white silence. Inside Dominic's Georgetown townhouse, a fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. We were alone, a rare respite from the constant whirlwind of our lives. He stood by the window, a glass of scotch in his hand, his silhouette stark against the wintry landscape. I watched him, admiring the way the firelight played across his features, highlighting the strength and determination etched into his face. "Sienna," he said, turning to face me, his voice low and resonant. "Come here." I obeyed, drawn to him by an invisible force. He took my hand in his touch sending a familiar warmth through me. "We've built something extraordinary together," he said, his eyes searching mine. "A partnership that transcends the petty squabbles and power plays of the city. We're a force to be reckoned with, a power couple that can shape the future." "She's the missing piece," I heard him think, his thoughts a symphony of admiration and affection. "The queen to my king. The fire to my ice." He didn't get down on one knee. He didn't need to. He simply looked at me, his gaze filled with respect and admiration, and asked me to be his wife. "Marry me, Sienna," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "Join forces with me. Not just politically but in every aspect of our lives. Let's build a dynasty. A legacy that will be remembered for generations to come." And in that moment, surrounded by the warmth of the fire and the quiet intimacy of his home, I knew that this was more than just a political alliance. This was a love story, a rare union of two powerful souls, a partnership that would change the very fabric of Washington society. I met his gaze, my heart pounding, my voice trembling with emotion. "Yes," I whispered. Then, with a breathless laugh, I corrected myself. "Hell yes." He slipped a ring on my finger, a stunning emerald that reflected the fire in my eyes. We sealed the deal with a kiss, a passionate embrace that spoke volumes about the depth of our connection. The news of our engagement spread like wildfire through the political circles, sending shockwaves through the city. Alliances shifted, enemies regrouped, and the whispers started anew. "Graves and Carter," they murmured. "The power couple. Untouchable. Unstoppable." And as I stood beside Dominic, his hand clasped firmly in mine, I knew they were right. We were a force to be reckoned with, a power couple that would rewrite the rules of the game. This was more than just a marriage. It was a declaration of war. A war against the old guard, the corrupt, the complacent. And we, Sienna and Dominic, the king and queen of the new era, were ready to conquer. The cathedral buzzed, not with the nervous anticipation of a typical wedding, but with the charged energy of power and influence. Every pew was filled with Washington's elite, senators with their practiced smiles, congressmen with their calculating eyes, lobbyists with their carefully crafted whispers. Journalists scribbled furiously, cameras flashed, and the air crackled with the unspoken tension of a city on the brink of a power shift. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a coronation. I stood in the antechamber, a breath away from stepping into the spotlight, my reflection shimmering in the antique mirror. The dress, a masterpiece of ivory silk and intricate lace, flowed around me like liquid moonlight. But it was my eyes that held the real power. The reflection of a woman who had risen from the ashes. A woman who had conquered her demons. A woman who had claimed her rightful place at the top. "She's a goddess," I heard a nearby senator think, his eyes wide with admiration. "Graves is a lucky man." Lucky? He had no idea. I thought, a smirk playing on my lips. "He's the one who's caught the tiger by the tail." And then I saw him. Nathan, tucked away in a back pew, his face pale and drawn, his eyes fixed on the aisle with a mixture of awe and despair. He'd been forced to attend, of course. Eleanor Vance, ever the pragmatist, had insisted on maintaining a presence at this momentous occasion. "She's breathtaking," I heard him think, his internal monologue a symphony of regret and longing. Not just beautiful but powerful. Radiant. I was a fool to let her go. The familiar pang of bitterness was fleeting. I'd moved beyond the hurt, the betrayal. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about me. About the life I'd built. The power I'd amassed. The future I was about to claim. The organ swelled, the signal for my entrance. I took a deep breath, the whispers of the crowd fading into a distant hum. My eyes met Dominic's. His gaze was filled with the love and respect that Nathan could never have comprehended. And as I walked down the aisle, the weight of every triumph, every battle won, every obstacle overcome propelled me forward. This wasn't just a walk towards my future husband. It was a victory march. A testament to my resilience, my strength, my unwavering determination to rise above the ashes of my past. And as I reached the altar, Dominic's hand outstretched to meet mine, I knew that this was only the beginning. The whispers of the crowd were a distant echo now, drowned out by the triumphant beating of my own heart. Nathan, with his regrets and his lost opportunities, was a fading shadow in the rearview mirror. This was my moment, my time to shine, my chance to claim the power that was rightfully mine. And as I looked out at the assembled crowd, a confident smile curving my lips, I knew that the game had just begun. The reception was a whirlwind of congratulations, veiled threats, and carefully orchestrated power plays. Champagne flowed freely, fueling the ambitions and anxieties of the assembled guests. I stood beside Dominic, my hand clasped in his, a queen surveying her court. Nathan, looking utterly out of place amidst the glittering throng, hovered near the edge of the dance floor. His eyes darted nervously between me and Dominic. He tried to avoid us, of course, but Dominic had a knack for making his presence felt, even in a crowded room. "Excuse me, darling," Dominic murmured, his lips brushing against my ear. "I have some unfinished business to attend to. Time to twist the knife." I heard him think, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Let him see what he's lost. I watched as Dominic approached Nathan, his movements deliberate, his expression unreadable. The crowd parted instinctively, sensing the undercurrent of tension, the silent clash of wills. "Mr. Pierce," Dominic said, his voice low and smooth, a dangerous undercurrent beneath the polite facade. "A word, if you please." Nathan flinched, his face paling. He couldn't refuse. Not here. Not with all eyes upon them. He followed Dominic to a secluded corner of the room, his shoulders slumped, his defeat palpable. Dominic's voice was low, almost a murmur, but it cut through the noise of the reception like a knife. "Do you regret leaving her now?" And in that moment Nathan knew, he hadn't just lost Sienna. He'd lost his future. He'd lost his place in the world. I watched from afar, a silent observer to Nathan's downfall. He'd underestimated me. Underestimated the woman he thought he knew. He traded a queen for a pawn. And now the game was over. She was my future. I heard him think, his internal monologue a symphony of despair. I could have had it all: power, love, a place at the top, but I threw it all away. Dominic's words were a final blow. A confirmation of Nathan's utter defeat. He hadn't just lost me. He'd lost the chance to be part of something bigger. Something that transcended the petty ambition of his former life. "I'm nothing," he thought, his spirit crumbling under the weight of his regret. A nobody. A footnote in her story. And as I watched him walk away, his shoulders slumped, his defeat evident in every step, I felt a flicker of not pity. Not exactly. Perhaps a touch of satisfaction. He'd made his bed. And now he had to lie in it. The whisper started anew as Nathan retreated from the reception, his absence a silent acknowledgement of his loss. The guests, their eyes gleaming with a mixture of awe and fear, watched me with newfound respect. I was no longer just Sienna Carter, the lobbyist, the strategist. I was Sienna Graves, the wife of the kingmaker, the woman who held the keys to the kingdom. And as I raised my glass in a silent toast, the firelight dancing in my eyes, I knew this was only the beginning. The game had changed. And I, the queen, was ready to rule.